Hello Reddit. I 28F have always had a knack for finding myself in tricky situations. Maybe it's the thrill or the challenge, but I can't seem to stop myself from stealing. It started small, a candy bar here, a pair of earrings there. Over time, it escalated to more significant items: designer clothes, expensive gadgets, and even cash from unsuspecting purses. My friends used to joke that I had the sticky fingers syndrome, but for me, it was more than just a joke, it was a compulsion. A few weeks ago, I had a particularly bad spell. I walked into a high-end boutique, as scanning for something I could slip into my bag. I spotted a gorgeous bracelet, something that would fetch a good price if I decided to sell it. The store was crowded, and the security seemed lax, so I took my chance. My heart raced as I palmed the bracelet and slipped it into my pocket, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Just as I was about to leave, a firm hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Excuse me, miss," a voice said. I turned around to face a stern-looking police officer. My stomach dropped. I had been caught red-handed. The officer, whose name tag read Officer Martin, escorted me to a back room where he called for backup. As I sat there, panic set in. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. I was facing serious trouble. When Officer Martin's backup arrived, I knew I had to act fast. In the span of a few minutes, I went from trying to formulate an excuse to deciding on a more drastic measure. It was clear from the way Officer Martin looked at me that he had the upper hand. But there was something else in his eyes too: curiosity, maybe even interest. I decided to take a gamble. As the minutes dragged on, I subtly shifted my demeanor. I went from defensive to flirtatious, testing the waters. I batted my lash, laughed softly at his jokes, and made sure my body language was inviting. To my relief, it seemed to be working. He began to relax, his tone becoming less authoritative and more personal. He asked about my life, my interests, and I played along, weaving a story that made me seem like just a misguided girl who needed a second chance. His gaze lingered on me, and I knew I had him on the hook. I had suggested to come to a private arrangement with him. That evening, after he had finished his shift, I found myself at his apartment. We talked for a while, but the conversation was superficial. Both of us knew why I was there. The tension built until it was almost unbearable. Finally, he made the first move, pulling me into a kiss that quickly escalated more physically. The next morning, I slipped out of his apartment before he woke up. My heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. It was from the thrill of my escape. I left a note on his nightstand, thanking him for giving me a second chance and promising I would stay out of trouble. It was a lie, of course. The compulsion to steal was still there. For the next few weeks, I tried to lay low. The experience with Officer Martin had shaken me more than I cared to admit, but the urge to steal was insatiable. It wasn't long before I found myself back in another store, scanning for something to take. This time, I was more careful, more calculated. Just when I had slipped a necklace into my bag, he was there watching me. He had told he to come with him to the back room, and he seemed slightly disappointed in me. He expressed to me that I was unwell and needed help. Over the next few months, Officer Martin became a regular presence in my life. He helped me find a therapist who specialized in kleptomania, and he even attended some of my sessions to offer support. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were times when I slipped up, but he was always there to guide me back on track. I remember asking him why he was telling me, and he responded with something I will never forget. He said, "Because you deserve a second chance." And sometimes, we all need a little help to find our way. It's been a year since that day, and while the urge to steal is still there, it's manageable. I've learned to control it, to channel my energy into healthier pursuits. And through it all, Officer Martin has remained by my side, not just as a mentor, but as a friend. So, Reddit, I guess what I'm trying to say is that no matter how deep a hole you've dug for yourself, there's always a way out. Sometimes, it just takes the right person to show you the way. Update 1. Hey Reddit, months have passed since my last encounter with Officer Martin. The urge to steal crept back into my life, and it was more intense. Despite my efforts to resist, The thrill of taking something that didn't belong to me gnawed at me incessantly. It was a compulsion I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. I found myself slipping back into old habits, pacing stores, and scanning for opportunities. Each time I stole something, the rush was exhilarating, but it was always followed by a wave of guilt and shame. I knew I needed help, but I was too ashamed to reach out to Officer Martin. I feared disappointing him, admitting that I had failed to overcome my demons. But Officer Martin was not one to give up easily. He had seen the darkness lurking within me and understood the struggles I faced. So when he noticed my absence from our therapy sessions, he knew something was amiss. He reached out to me, offering his support once again. At first, I resisted, ashamed to admit that I had fallen back into my old ways. But Officer Martin was persistent, gently urging me to confide in him. Reluctantly, I opened up about my relapse, expecting him to scold me or turn his back on me in disappointment. To my surprise, his response was far from what I expected. Instead of reprimanding me, he listened with empathy, understanding the inner turmoil I was experiencing. And then, he proposed a radical ideal way for me to satisfy my urge to steal without breaking the law. He explained that there were places where I could legally indulge in the thrill of stealing, where the rush of adrenaline was part of the experience. Places like escape rooms, where the objective was to solve puzzles and unlock hidden treasures. Or events like scavenger hunts, where participants raced against the clock to find hidden objects. At first, I was skeptical. How could stealing legally compare to the real thing? But as Officer Martin outlined his plan, I began to see the merit in his proposal. It was a way for me to channel my impulses into a harmless activity, satisfying my cravings without hurting anyone in the process. With Officer Martin's guidance, I began to explore these alternative outlets for my compulsions. We attended escape rooms together, working as a team to unravel the mysteries and claim our prizes. We joined scavenger hunts, racing against other participants to uncover hidden treasures scattered throughout the city. And with each new adventure, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins, but this time, it was different. This time, I knew that I wasn't breaking the law, that I wasn't causing harm to anyone else. And that knowledge brought me a sense of relief and satisfaction that I had never experienced before. As the weeks passed, I found myself relying less and less on the thrill of stealing to satisfy my cravings. Instead, I turned to Officer Martin and our newfound adventures as a way to channel my impulses into something positive. And with his unwavering support by my side, I knew that I could overcome any obstacle that stood in my way.